Hello and welcome to the Reef Talk Extra channel, and today I'm going to be unboxing my brand new Jecod DMP-40. Now I'm going to be doing a full overview, a full review on the main Reef Talk channel in the next couple of weeks. So today I'm just going to unbox it, show you everything you get inside the box and kind of give you my initial impressions in terms of things like build quality and design. And I have a Vortech MP-40, the OG pump that the Jecod is a copy of. So I'm going to tell you kind of the differences in the design and build quality between the two. Now there's no disclaimer needed for this video. I bought both of these power heads with my own money. So let's get stuck straight in, starting with the box itself. Now the box it comes in this kind of gloss white cardboard that everybody seems to love these days. But the box itself, and this really doesn't matter, but the box itself does feel a little bit cheap compared to the nicer brands that you tend to get. And because I bought this from AliExpress, you can see that it's a bit ripped in the corner. Literally, there's daylight in there, there's a hole there, and the box is generally kind of a bit battered and bruised. So this hasn't shipped that well from China, but what I would say is it was actually relatively carefully wrapped in bubble wrap, and everything inside is intact. So while the box looks a little bit damaged, it hasn't caused a problem to the pump. So now let's take a look inside the actual box then. And the first thing we get is a couple of bits of paperwork. So we have a user manual that I think actually is worth looking at. Most of the time I don't tend to look at user manuals, but there is lots of stuff in here like flow patterns and little tips on how it works and all that sort of stuff. So I will read this at some point. The other thing you get in terms of paperwork though is a certificate of quality card. So they've done a quality control check, which is great to see. And actually the date on this is the 10th of October 2024, and it is currently the 1st of November 2024. Now I bought this just over a week ago, which means that this has not been sat around in a factory somewhere. This is hot off the press. It had been made probably a week or two before I bought it, which I always appreciate. Into the rest of the box then, and we straight away get into the power head itself. And there's a few things it comes with. We're going to start with the wet side, and this is the part of course that goes inside your aquarium, and you may have already seen other videos online. The main difference is that this comes with little suction cups. So the MP-40, the original OG Vortech, is rated for up to 19mm glass, whereas the DMP-40, the Jecod copy, is rated up to 21mm glass. And I wonder if the suction cups are something to do with that. Anyway, it looks a bit clunky and it looks a bit cheap, to be honest. I don't like the way that the suction cups look, but ultimately you won't be able to see them when they go up against the glass. So if they do improve gripping, so much the better. And I think possibly part of the reason they've done this is because with the MP-40, when you buy these, you get various size gaskets, which means that if you've got a 10mm thick glass, you can still use it and you just put a bigger gasket to make the glass thicker. And if you've got a 90mm thick glass, you take away the gasket and it still grips nicely to the magnet. Whereas this is just a one size fits all. There's no gaskets, just the suction cups. Now I don't know how that will affect performance, if at all, but what I do know is that the 19mm glass I have on my main tank does just about let these the MP-40s grip, but it's close and sometimes they do feel a little bit loose and like they're going to fall off. So the Jecod DMP-40 should with a bit of luck be more sturdy, but I'll come back to that when I do the proper review. When you take the suction cups off, then you're left with the rest of the wet side, and it rattles around a little bit, which the MP-40 does to a tiny extent, but less so. And I'll show you how that happens by when I take the cover off. So to take the cover off, you just twist it anti-clockwise, whereas on the Jecod, you twist it the other way. And I can never quite remember which way these go. Right, there it goes, it comes off. I do always find that these are a little bit fiddly to take the cage off, although I would say that this is a well-used, several-year-old wet side, so a brand new Jecod is always likely to come off quicker. But my initial impressions is that the Jecod cage does come off quite easily, so I appreciate that. The cage itself then, I'll just compare the two here. So the Jecod is on the left, the DMP-40 is this one, and the Vortech is on the right. Just looking at it, all the kind of grid lines are a little bit thicker on the Jecod than they are on the MP-40, the OG, which potentially means a little bit less flow will get through, and it feels a cheaper plastic. It doesn't feel as nice quality, but we're talking marginal differences. And the only thing actually I don't like about this, the Jecod has this sort of central inner ring here, which the MP-40, the OG, doesn't have. And there are times when I pull the wet side out because it's stopped, and you need to kind of push your finger in there to spin the, let me see if I can show you that, to spin the propeller and get it started again. And Doing that on this is really fiddly on the Jecod, so you might have to take the cage off if it gets stuck to give it a bit of a spin, but a minor issue. As to the rest of the wet side itself, this, if I'm honest, does feel a little bit cheap. The plastic feels cheap and flimsy. It's all kind of, I think it's 2 parts there. I can't work out if you can actually take this apart further. With the OG Vortech MP-40, you just need to pop off a couple of bits and then you can take the magnet out itself, and that's really useful because there are times when you need to clean these because it gets a bit gunked up, and also if anything is going to rust on this, it's going to be the magnet on any power head, so it's really handy to be able to take this out to check if it's rusting, and if it is, you can throw it away, but more to the point, if it's not, you just need to give it a bit of a clean. Whereas as far as I can see, you can't do the same on the Jecod. Now, I'm not going to commit to that, I might be wrong, and I've not had a proper play around with it because I don't want to break it, but I did spend a couple of minutes just trying to twist it and loosen it and leverage some bits, but I couldn't get into that, so I don't think you can get into it, but don't quote me on that. The other thing to notice about this is that with the MP-40, the OG, it doesn't really shift around, it just sits there nice and flush and it's all nice and solid, whereas the Jecod, this slides side to side and also tilts side to side as well, so it feels a little bit loose. Now actually when the cage is on, you don't get that, and I'm sure that is quite clearly by design, it's supposed to be that way, but it just feels a bit more loose and not quite as well put together as the original OG MP-40. Moving on from the wet side then, and the first thing that stood out to me when I opened this really was the power supply. So it's a perfectly thick cable, the usual kettle fit one end that goes into the power brick and then a 3-pin plug at the other end, but this is a US plug, I believe, and it comes with this really super cheap plastic, it just feels awful, adapter. I'm sure it does work, and I think it might be safe. It's got a CE mark on it, but I'm going to throw this away straight away because I just don't want it. It just feels really cheap, and I don't know about you, I've got millions of these kettle to 3-pin cables lying around, so I'm just going to throw this away completely and put my own one on. And if you don't have these lying around, they're a couple of quid online anyway, so marks down for the cheap adapter, but a very easy fix. As to the rest of the power supply though, it's a much better story. The power supply itself is made by GVE. Let me just show you that there. And now GVE, I'm sure these are not as reliable as the power supplies that Ecotech use, and that's likely to be an area where Jecod have skimped. But to be fair, I've got loads of GVE power heads lying around my house, and I've had them for a few years. It's a brand that I've noticed. I've never had any problems with them, so I don't expect this to cause a problem, but it is probably safe to say that this is a cheaper and less reliable power supply than Ecotech use. Moving on to the exciting part though, and that is the dry side. So this is the main brains of the pump itself, and this is where the motor lives. It's pretty heavy actually. Let me just feel weight by weight. Similar kind of weight to the MP-40, and straight away I can show you that actually it's quite a lot taller, to be fair. Yeah, that's quite a lot bigger. If I put them side by side like that, yeah. Do you know what? So the MP-40 does look quite compact next to the DMP-40, the Jecod. It is a bit more bulky, but it's not huge, and I don't think you'll notice a massive difference. But you might not want a bulky look on a smaller tank, but fairly minimal. But it is worth noticing that the Jecod is a little bit fatter, a little bit chunkier than the OG MP-40. The dry side also has suction cups, of course, so this will suck to the outside of the glass. And if you take that off, can you take that off? Oh, looks like it's glued on, so I'm not sure you can take that off. But either way, this should be what part of what helps this grip to the side of your tank. Apart from that, this is pretty unremarkable. It's a very similar design to the Jecod. It does look, sorry, to the MP-40. It does look slightly different, but it looks fine. I never have a problem with these sitting on the outside of my tank. I think they look totally fine, the MP-40s anyway. And the Jecod one, it looks all right. It's clearly designed to go upright, so the cable points up that way, which is the same as the MP-40, because that's the way the writing reads. And there's not much else to tell you about that. I'll tell you more when I get this up and running, but for now, it looks pretty decent. And apart from the wet and dry sides, there are just a couple of more things I need to show you. Firstly, it comes with these little cable tie things that stick to your tank and hold the cable in place, same as the ones on the MP-40. And the other major thing that I need to show you is the control box. Now, first impressions on this are that it's not particularly good quality, to be completely honest with you. I took the bracket off earlier actually, so it does come with a little wall bracket, which in theory is great because you can mount it to your cabinet, but that mounting bracket, let me take that off, is super flimsy. It's really bad quality. It just feels super cheap, and there's no screw holes in it, so there's no way of attaching it to your cabinet straight out of the box. Doesn't come with any Velcro or any adhesive tape on the other side, so you'll need to do that yourself. But to be honest with you, I don't really like this. I think it's pretty cheap. It's better than nothing, and it does come with something that, so I suppose I give it points for that, but that does feel pretty cheap and nasty. Moving on to the control box itself, and it's a fairly familiar story in terms of the build quality. This is probably the least important thing in terms of build quality because you're not going to be playing with it an awful lot, probably only when you set it up and when you want to put it in feed mode or turn the pumps off temporarily, but this does feel pretty cheap, and especially compared to the MP-40, these are much more solid. They've got a little dial that you twist really to turn it up and down, and there's the various kind of rubberized power buttons, and this is, I've never tested it, but this always feels at least splash proof because it's got kind of the rubberized bits on the front. So that's a much better quality designed box, power box, than the Jecod one, and this does look a little bit cheap, but again, who really cares? It's not the most important thing in the world, but it definitely is worth noting that the control box on the Jecod looks pretty cheap. There's a couple of things that it has on it that I'll show you here. So it's got mode buttons that look like it's got pulse, kind of more of a wave feature, and then a couple of other modes that are presumably random. The buttons on it are a mode select, a pause button, up and down in terms of intensity, a power button, and a mode/feed button. So this will have a feed mode, presumably that will turn the pumps off for 10 minutes. And the final thing to note on the control box for the Jecod is that, and this is actually quite disappointing I think, on the underside all you get is the cable that goes in that connects to the MP-40, the DMP-40 itself, the power head, and then a socket for the power supply. There is nowhere else on this whatsoever. There are no other holes or no other connections, and that means that one, you can't connect it to a 0 to 10 volt port, but more importantly, you can't connect it to a battery backup in the same way that you can with the MP-40. So on this one, that's the main power supply, but that there is the battery backup port. And so all you need to do is buy the Ecotech battery backup, or you can do it a DIY method, but you just buy the Ecotech battery backup. It works really easily, and setting up a battery backup is super easy on the MP-40, whereas that is not the case with the Jecod. There are ways of doing it, but it's just a bit of a faff. You've got to know what you're doing. And I think for the majority of people, they're going to prefer the battery backup option on the Vortech than the Jecod. So that's everything you get in the box. What are my first impressions? Well, the build quality is certainly a lot cheaper than the Vortech MP-40, unsurprisingly, and you can see that there are some design touches that Vortech have thought about, that Ecotech have thought about, that Jecod just haven't. So it's very much feels like a cheap copy. The build quality isn't great, and there are a few things that just make it feel a little bit cheap and plasticky, certainly compared to the Vortech. However, for the money, bearing in mind this is less than half the price of a Vortech MP-40, it is totally acceptable, and there's nothing on here that I think is awful and is a reason enough to put you off buying it. And with a product like this, a cheap copy of a nice expensive power head, this part is the unboxing and looking at the product when it's dry and you've just got hold of it, is always likely to be the most disappointing part. And I'm expecting big things when I get it set up, and I suspect it will perform quite well as an actual power head. So if you want to see that, make sure you subscribe to this channel and the Reef Talk Extra channel, and I'll get my video live in the next couple of weeks. And if you've got any questions, let me know in the comment section below. And until next time, happy reefing.